Welcome to Daily Meditation with Sangha Live.
Good morning, dear Sangha friends. I was just reflecting as I was sitting here looking at your messages in the chat and how when I first taught on this platform, how strange I found it this way, that I get to see myself and I don't actually get to see all of you. But it's remarkable the sense of community that builds up with us. Jules says this safe container that we've built, that you've all built through your practice and presence. And actually how in a kind of Zoom meeting, when you just flick your camera on, we don't have to exert ourselves to connect, really. It all just happens. But it's lovely to see the way that, you reach out and say hello to each other, and actually what that does to the heart, it really builds a sense of connection. So there's something to me about that little bit of effort that's required from each of us to signal our participation that actually really feeds that sense of a supportive community. So just thanking you all for that, and really warm welcome to those who are joining the community for the first time. And then we have our theme for the week, which is a follow-on from the theme from the other week that I was here recently, Still Here, Still Now. And I was just also wondering to myself whether anyone is feeling a little bored with the theme of being still here, still now. And if that's the case, I recognize that those feelings can arise. They arise in this mind also, especially that word, still here, still now. We're still here, and we're still doing this. So then we can just maybe gently, humorously ask ourselves, well, where else would we rather be? Where else would we rather be? Where else could we be, in fact? So yesterday morning, I was inviting us to notice the stillness that is here, even as we feel the flow or notice the changing flow of experience passing through. There's this kind of paradoxical nature to our experience where we can tune into a sense of stillness within or underlying this flow of change. And I also pointed to the meditation object of the breath, which many of us use as an anchor in our meditation, as we could see it, each breath, as something that includes a whole world of experience, and how we can frame that world of experience within the time span or the space of a single breath. And just like the breath, the world of experience, each experience is rising and falling in its own tempo, as a way of unhooking from that being swept along in this current from past to future, which, as some of you were reflecting back, is a construct in the mind. So whether you're using the breath as your meditation object or something else like sound or touch, what this meditation object offers us is a frame, an anchor, or a place to take our seat or to take our stand steadily so that we can witness the nature of change. We can explore the nature of change. What is it that's changing and how is it changing? And so today I wanted to share one of my favorites and another of my favorite suttas with you, with which many of you, or some of you at least, will be familiar, which is the sutta on the 8 worldly dharmas, or the failings of the world, as Thanissaro Bhikkhu translates it. And for those who want to look it up at some point, it's Anguttara Nikaya 8.6, the Lokavipatti, or the Lokadharma Sutta. And this is where the Buddha says that there are 8 worldly conditions that spin after the world, and the world spins after these 8. What are these 8? Gain and loss, status and disgrace, censure and praise, pleasure and pain. These are the 8 worldly conditions that spin after the world, and the world spins after these 8 worldly conditions. So these are sometimes also called the vicissitudes, not a word that we often use in everyday speech these days in English. It just means things that change. And they're also often called the 8 worldly winds, because the wind is a good metaphor for this phenomenon, even though actually in the discourse it doesn't say anything about wind, interestingly enough. But it's a good metaphor or simile, the blowing of the wind. And just as today I have sunshine coming in through the window, yesterday there was rain on the window pane at this time. These are weather patterns that assail us from the outside and also from the inside. Yesterday evening, I was watching the BBC obituary documentary they put on about Pope Francis. And it was interesting to see the ups and downs in the fortunes of his life, both in terms of his own circumstances and the praise and the blame that came at him for different things, that ways that he'd handled different situations or not handled different situations. And so this really illustrated to me the fact that we're all subject to this. And this is what the Buddha said, we're all subject to these 8 worldly conditions. And he said, the unwise, foolish person, or the ignorant person, what he calls the uninstructed, run-of-the-mill person, experiences these 8 ups and downs: gain and loss, status and disgrace, censure and praise, something who's called blame and praise, pleasure and pain. And so does the wise person, the well-taught person, the awake person. But there's a difference between them. Nonetheless, there's nobody in the world, even the Buddha himself, nobody doesn't experience these things. So then the sutta goes on to talk about, well, what's the difference between the unwise person or foolish person who experiences these and the wise person, the awake person? And this is the in the traditional language, is the uninstructed ordinary person and the well-taught noble disciple. And this is a dichotomy that we find in a lot of places in the teachings. And rather than let it drag us into the trap of, am I a good person or a bad person? Which camp do I fall into? I personally like to reflect that my mind can fall into either camp at different places, at different times. So it's the question really is, am I inhabiting the mind of a wise person or the mind of a foolish person in this moment? And then this distinction that he draws between what would be indicative of a wise way to approach this and what would be indicative of a foolish, unwise way to approach it. It becomes a really useful thing to look, what's happening right now? How am I engaging with this? So he says, when for an unwise person, these winds of change blow through or spin our world, we don't reflect wisely, noticing that these conditions arise. They also change. They're inconstant, stressful, and subject to change. They arise out of particular conditions, and with other conditions, they'll dissolve again. And so the unwise mind, the unwise person, doesn't recognize it as it has come to be. And therefore, our minds get consumed with gain. They get consumed with loss. They get consumed by status, fame, or disgrace. They get consumed by praise and blame. They get consumed by pleasure or pain. And they welcome one and rebel against, he says, rebel against the other. And therefore we get trapped in this spin of the world. We get trapped in this painful spin of the world. Whereas when the mind is inhabiting a seat of wisdom, and this is why finding a, as I said, a seat or a vehicle where we can anchor, where we can take a stand, because if you take a stand on the praise or the blame or the piece of good fortune that's coming now, you're going to be sitting on a roller coaster. If you can take a stand somewhere in the stillness that notices, that understands, that sees this changing play of conditions, the experience is different. So a wise person will notice this praise, blame, gain and loss, etc., have arisen for me. They are inconstant, stressful, and subject to change. And then their mind doesn't remain consumed. It's not consumed with the gain or the loss or the praise or the blame. And then in that way, we can abandon, uncling from the welcoming what we want, the getting rid of what we don't want, and the mind can experience peace. And this is the difference in the face of these worldly conditions that spin the world, of either being caught in the spin, helplessly in the spin, or being able to sit steady in the midst of it. One of the ways that the fruits of practice is felt as we feel it, is described as the ability to experience equanimity or an unshakable heart in the midst of these worldly conditions. And you'll notice how these worldly conditions all involve some degree of the comparing mind, of thought, that we've got to be assessing somehow, comparing the present with the past or the future, or comparing what I have now with what I'd rather have. A different topic for this morning, a more comfortable body, and so forth. So if we can, again, as we've been doing together, remind ourselves that the thought we're having is an event arising in the present moment. We can witness the arising of the thought. We can let it go. We can choose whether it's a thought that's worth continuing now, or continuing at some later point, maybe after our meditation, or whether it's a thought that's best left to just run out of steam on its own, not to feed it. And then remembering that if we don't cling to the past, these verses that began this reflection on being here and now, about not clinging to the past, not clinging to the future. If you don't cling to the present, you will go from place to place at peace. So maybe just in our practice today and in the course of the day, can notice when those phenomena of praise and blame, fame and disrepute, maybe some of us are not so much in the public domain, but now even on social media, one finds oneself, those of you who do that in a field of the public domain, or maybe just within our family or social networks, we can experience things like that. The ups and downs, the gains and losses, and even the different, we all have pleasant and unpleasant experiences, sensory experiences through the day. But rather than being spun in our reactivity to them, can we see them from this place of stillness, from this place of wisdom, and reflect, notice their changing nature, and then be more choiceful about how we engage. Good. So let's meditate together. Just finding yourself a comfortable posture. If you want a moment to stretch, get comfortable, get yourself organized. Taking your seat, literally or metaphorically, if you're in a different posture, here and now. Taking our seats together, here and now. Bringing the attention to the felt sense of body in connection with resting on the earth, to find our groundedness, our steadiness. Taking a moment to expand, widen the field of our attention to include the soundscape around us. To invite a sense of spaciousness. In that space, acknowledging the sense of Sangha, the presence of each other, in our different locations, to invite a sense of goodwill, warm-heartedness, that the space of our awareness could be perfumed or suffused with a sense of goodwill. Goodwill that includes ourself, this breathing body, this flow of experience, resting here. And then finding our way to our meditation object, or letting our meditation object, whatever we use to steady ourselves in presence, such as the rising and the falling of the breath, let it find us. And continuing to allow experience to come to us as we take our seat here, so we don't have to go looking for different things. Just noticing what's already arising here. And if from time to time a current of thought arrives and calls you, and just notice if it's somehow wrapped up with any of these 8 worldly things that spin the world, with a comparing and evaluating gain and loss, with a wanting more pleasure, less pain, with a labeling of experience in these ways, or with some aspect of praise and blame, whether that's coming from the outside in or the inside out. And these can be a little wake up nudge to say, oh, look, how am I looking at this? What happens if I look at it from this place of steadiness, through the lens of wisdom? I will continue to practice quietly, and I'll just offer an occasional reminder. Sometimes, if you find that your mind has wandered out from the still or the stiller point at the center of the world, of the turning world, out into the spin, sometimes just that recognition might be enough, and you might feel inclined to just let the breath or the body or the ground draw you back to the center, to the relative stillness. But it might also be interesting to just linger and see, well, what's spinning and how is it spinning? Is there some way in which these 8 worldly things, one or two, a pair of these 8 worldly things, are involved in this spin? Seeking pleasure, pushing away pain, welcoming gain, and rebelling against loss, wanting praise, not wanting blame. Recognizing this is both natural, but also in that whole game, there's nowhere safe and reliable to take a seat. So why not practice taking our seat somewhere we can rely? This insightful inhabiting of just this moment. If we forget what we're doing in our meditation, is now is always the moment to begin again, to find our ground, our space, our attitude of friendliness or goodwill. And our steadiness. The last couple of minutes of the meditation, just really tuning in again to what is here now. Thank you, friends, for your practice. May our practice be of benefit to all beings.
Today's podcast is an offering to you from our archive of freely available live daily classes. We make wisdom teachings and meditations as freely available as possible to as many people as wish to practice. You can help ensure we can continue to support a worldwide Sangha by leaving a review wherever you get your podcasts, by sharing this with someone who'd be interested, and by offering a small financial support at sangha.live/donate.